Welcome back to PolticKIng. Reed Dickens joins me in studio, the former Assistant White House Press Secretary for George W. Bush, the founder and CEO of the Dickens Capital Group, and CEO and founder of MARUCCI Sports. Great pleasure. Always good having you.
Thanks for having me back.
What did you think of what former Senator Graham said about the government and keeping the truth away about 9/11?
To say that the government of Saudi has relationships with radical Islamic groups or has relationships in this area is not a stretch. To imply that the king knew about 9/11 is a mouthful and something that should be taken very lightly. But I think this leads to a broader discussion that actually is relevant and makes our elections matter more, which is that ultimately when you elect officials, you're electing them to make judgments. This comes down to an issue of judgment. I think it's possible that the king knew. I don't think it's plausible. But let's say that he did know. That gets down to the issue of what do the people need to know versus what do they want to know. Because let me tell you this, if the king did know about 9/11 and that all of a sudden was on the axis, let's go back hypothetically. The last thing you want is America taking military action in the land of two holy places. We would have seen jihad like the world's never seen. So I think this is pushing the envelope of when people think that all information should be free and that we should know everything. I think this is pushing a dangerous envelope of what people need to know versus what the people should and want to know. Because ultimately, if you don't trust your government officials' judgment on what they disclose to the mass public, then you should vote the bums out of office.
So you would say to Senator Graham, leave it alone?
I would say he's a very credible and well-respected government official, and I think he's spending it on something that might not be the wisest place to spend his credibility.
Let's move to other things. The deal with Iran. What's going to happen?
Two things on Iran, Larry. One, we had a lot of information. There was no lack of information, right? But we violated international norms when we didn't hold Assad accountable for nuking his own people, and even after we used the bright red line language. So number one, I would say we violated international norms by not holding him accountable. Number two, we withdrew our troops from Iraq. And number three, the White House intentionally leaked that they were not considering military action, which removed all of our leverage that America usually has. So ultimately, we had all the right intel and all the right information, but we didn't have any leverage. So we were negotiating from a position of weakness. And, you know, Secretary Rice, Condoleezza Rice, says often, and I agree with her, that when America doesn't take a position of strength and a position of leadership on the international stage, it creates a void and a vacuum, and I think that's what happened here.
But they're not stupid, so why do you think they did it? Why do you think they took that position? The Obama
I'm not going to try to speak, because I know even internally there were some philosophic differences even between Secretary Clinton and President Obama. What I would say is that they boxed themselves and America into a corner by leaking that we weren't going to use military action. Even if they didn't want to use military action, you don't leak that publicly.
The puzzling part is that in some senses he's one of the more hawkish presidents we've ever had, with drones, and not afraid to take, shoots. You got Osama bin Laden to shoot him. Yeah. How do you make it? Is there a dichotomy?
And I'm not questioning President Obama's willingness to take military action. I think in this particular situation with Iran, look at it from a pure negotiating dynamic. We put ourselves in a position of weakness.
But what's wrong with the deal?
Well, I think that's like saying what's wrong with immigration. There's a lot of complex moving parts. I would say ultimately it puts us in a position where they're going to go further than we ever thought that it would be safe for them to go, and they don't feel like there's consequences for that. So, I know there's a lot of debates on both sides. I don't have enough information internally to know what the discussions actually were.
All right, we move to other things. The issue of same-sex marriage and its role in the 2016 election. The Supreme Court's going to rule. Everybody's predicting they're going to rule go. I guess that's the betting's based on Kennedy. Yeah. So I think it shouldn't play culturally. I always say, and I think you've heard me say this before, politics is downstream from culture. And culturally, this issue has left the station. The train has left the station. It should not be an issue 2 years from now. If it is, I would say that means it's a pretty quiet election, right? Because if you have an unstable international stage, war,
terrorism. I don't think this will take a front seat as a discussion issue. I think
it's not going to take a back seat.
No, it'll be batted around, especially in the presidential debate that's on domestic policy. It absolutely will be, and I think Governor Bush is already starting to make some statements to signal where he's going to be. I think he needs to be careful with this issue because, like I said, culturally, this train has already left the station.
So what you're saying he's thinking about it? You're working for.
Well,
let's set it straight. You're working for Jeb, right?
I'm not working for him. I actually support Governor Bush. I think he's the most qualified, so I am a supporter of his, but I'm not working for him. And let me say this. I was with him recently, and I've heard him say have the opportunity to address this topic, this same-sex marriage, and he intentionally avoided giving an answer. So I think his team and he are I think they're being very thoughtful on how they want to approach this issue because he's yet to address it.
Similar to the way Obama handled it
right.
in the early days.
Yeah. He'll defer as long as possible.
All right, what's this election going to be about? First, let's talk about Jeb's chances of getting the nomination. What are they?
So the Republican primary, if you look at it, it's an elongated map, right? It's a marathon. We don't have, whereas on the Democrat side, you can pretty much lock up the nomination in a few states. The Republican primary is a marathon, and I think it's a game of attrition. I think you've got several candidates who have some really good applause lines that are going to stick their finger in some emotional topics like immigration, and they're going to get an emotional reaction, especially from the more conservative part of the party. But I don't think they have the platform, the financing, or the strategy to make it through the whole primary. So I think Governor Bush, even if he's not giving people goosebumps, even if there's some people with some hesitation about wanting another Bush, he still, right now, has the best financing. He has the best team in terms of talent. If you look at the silent primary as funding and talent, he got 80% of the financing and 80% of the funding and the talent.
But who turns out in those primaries? Doesn't the Tea Party turn out en masse?
Yeah, which
which
is why I think there'll be some surprises. I mean, you remember when Governor Huckabee won 6 or 7 primaries?
Yeah.
But he wasn't built to last through the whole primary. I think there'll be some surprises. I think Ted Cruz is going to surprise some people. I think Marco Rubio may win. I don't think Governor Bush is going to come out of the gate very strong, right, in Iowa, New Hampshire. I don't think he'll come out very strong, which is going to create that feeling of there's blood in the water.
Yeah.
And when when the media especially smells blood in the water, I think it'll create a lot of excitement. But if you fast forward a year, I think Governor Bush will be the last one standing.
Will Christie be in play?
It'll be interesting to see what he does. I don't know whether he'll run or not. If he does, he'll get a lot of attention. I think he'll be similar. You and I discussed this before. I think he'll be similar to Rudy Giuliani. He'll get a lot of attention in the media, but not a lot of votes.
Mitt Romney says that it looks like bribery when talking about Clinton and the donations. How far is that issue going to go?
Wow, that's a complicated one for Hillary because I think people are a little too quick to judge because I don't know how often Hillary and Bill talk. And I don't say that as a jab at their marriage. I say that they have 2 very separate platforms, and Bill has a global platform. There's disclosure laws in Canada. There's disclosure laws in Europe that are different than they are here. So I don't have enough information to accuse them. What I will say is that if I were running Hillary Clinton's campaign, this is going to be a headache, for sure.
And how does she handle it? If you were going to run the campaign, okay, what do you do?
The key to
is there a Bayer aspirin?
I've always said that the key to handling crises, any sort of media frenzy, is speed and transparency. I think every time there's an accusation, they need to be as transparent and quick as possible.
How about the gang-up procedure? Like every day, the New York Post attacks Hillary in another way, and there's attack here. Everybody in the primary. Can there hit a point here where women start getting angry in America, people start getting defensive of her, where she looks like a victim? And if she looks like a victim, there's going to propel sympathy.
Wow, I mean it depends on what block of the electorate you're speaking of, right? I mean, there's only a few people in play. I think some would even say there's only going to be a few counties in Florida and a few counties in Ohio that decide this election again. And so some people say that's tragic, but that may be the reality. So I don't know if sympathy will be the emotion. She's such a known commodity. What I will say is she's trying to be more human this time. Last time she ran a campaign of inevitability, and it didn't work. As Jon Stewart said on The Daily Show a few weeks ago, that who would have thought it's not like some no-name person's going to come along and beat her. That's exactly what happened. So.
Do you think it would be important if she had opposition in the primaries?
So I think it would make her a better candidate and potentially a better president if she won. I think a lot of people think that the candidates get beat up in a primary. I actually think they get sharpened. Because what happens is, if you're a communications person, let's say you're a communications advisor to Jeb or Hillary, you actually want these controversial topics to be as discussed as possible so that they're old news. I actually think candidates get sharper during these debates. So in theory, if she goes effectively unopposed, I think she may go into the general not in fighting shape.
How about the public? If it's Clinton versus Bush, can we take the old Barbara axiom, enough already?
Well, so here's, George W., my old boss, says sometimes, and I think it's a very funny quote, that what does it matter if it's Bush, Clinton, Obama, Bush, or Bush, Clinton, Obama, Clinton at this point? I think that'll be a very tired and worn out story a year from now. But here, on a more serious note, here's what I would say. I think it's a little bit intellectually lazy how much the media pays, how much emphasis they give that topic, and here's why. If Marvin Bush or Neil Bush were running for president, I would say, oh boy, it's just their last name, right? But Jeb happens to be the most qualified person in the party, and Hillary happens to be the most qualified person in her party.
As you have often said, Reed, much to your credit, for 2 years, the best possible race in 2016.
I think
you have often said that. You think it would be run on issues?
I think if their last names were Smith and Thompson, they're the best two candidates on each side.
Okay. Will it therefore be a good campaign in the sense the debates will be good? Both of them are highly intelligent. Both of them have a tremendous experience.
No,
Will we have we're not going to have a McCain tragedy vice presidential selection. These people will pick well, will they not?
Here's, I've said this often, and I believe it, and so I'll keep saying it. I think Jeb and Hillary are both obsessed with policy. They're policy wonks to their core. And I think that's going to lead to a very substantive campaign. Now, there will be underlings on both sides throwing mud and throwing dirt, because that's what underlings do, right? But what I would say is at the top, I think it's going to be very substantive. I actually think Senator Clinton and Governor Bush are going to do the best they can to keep their teams focused on the issues, because I think they think there's a philosophic chasm between the two of them, and I think they want a substantive debate.
All right, we're still a while away, but we're going to have you on a lot.
Right.
If you were to pick Bush's vice presidential choice and Hillary's vice presidential choice, who would you pick?
I actually think for Governor Bush, I think Governor Nikki Haley would be the ideal pick.
Female.
She's not just female. She is a business-savvy, manufacturing, pro-business, minority female governor. You can't design, and so last time we tried to just play the demographic game, it backfired because there was no substance, there was no there, and I think everyone knows how that played out. Governor Haley is no Sarah Palin. I actually had dinner with her in her governor's mansion a while back and talked business, and she knows policy. She knows business. So if I were picking for Governor Bush, that's who I'd pick. For Senator Clinton, Secretary Clinton, I'm sorry, I've said Senator a few times. For Secretary Clinton, I think it really doesn't matter as much. I think it would be maybe to her credit to pick a Jim Webb or a Martin O'Malley or one of her competitors. Take the Abraham Lincoln approach. I actually think it doesn't matter as much for her. She's such a brand. She's such a force in the party. I think she needs somebody that can complement her.
All right. Will this be a high turnout election?
So if you look at the trajectory, starting, let's say start in 2000, where I spent, the 7 months in Florida. I'm kidding. That's 36 days in Florida. You're talking about 100 million, and now we've worked our way up, I believe, to 125 million people voting. That's still only half the electorate, which is tragic. I think Iraq had more people show up at the polls with people shooting at them. I believe if you have a big name people on both sides of the ticket, and that may not happen. You may end up with some shocking, and that'll be fun. If it ends up not being Hillary and Jeb, that'll be even more fun, because that means some epic upsets have taken place. But I would say if it's Hillary versus Jeb, I think the turnout's going to be good, because it's going to stir up a lot of passion.
Always great having you. We're going to see a lot of you, Reed.
I can't wait.
Ready.
This is going to be a fun cycle.
I want to thank Reed Dickens for joining me on this edition of PolticKING, and remember, I want to hear from you. You want to think about the Saudi connection to 9/11? You want to talk about the government release of all the pages of congressional inquiry into the attacks? You want to talk about 2016? Join me on my Facebook page. As always, you can share your thoughts with me on Twitter by tweeting @KingsThings and use the PolticKING hashtag. That's all for this edition of PolitiKING.